Today, my talk is about how Buddhism can help us be compassionate in a world of anger. Yesterday, I had finished formatting my slides and cleaning up my talk track late afternoon and was getting ready to go out to the grocery store to buy the altar fruit offerings when I heard the news on the car radio of the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Thankfully, his injuries are minor, but tragically, another person attending the rally was killed. I was going to open my talk with the admission that the national election this fall and the lead up to it was something I really filling me with dread. That's an unfortunate thing to have to say, to admit in a country where we have the privilege to elect our government leaders. But I feel that there's such polarizing attitudes on so many topics in the world today, and it's almost hard to believe that this could all be happening. I have never witnessed this level of anger, and now we have come to this unbelievable level of violence, and it is tragic. I didn't change anything else in my talk today, but I felt like I had to address yesterday's horrible incident. It makes me further worried about the state of things, but also reinforces the need for our core Buddhist teachings now more than ever. First of all, I will tell you this is not a political discussion or an opportunity for me to highlight any political or social platform. We all have our own perspectives and positions on things. I really only discuss politics with close friends who I know share my own similar perspectives. It seems that we're in a perfect storm of unrest across the world, aggression, war, extremist politics in some countries in Europe as well, not just here. But the environment now has provided the opportunity for very public and disturbing rhetoric. We are seeing such suffering accompanied by strongly polarized perspectives. It may not affect yours or my daily life activities, but all it takes is to access our daily news source to feel a sense of disbelief with what's happening in the world. I sometimes wonder if the majority of the population is still reasonable and we're only seeing these problems magnified with such large exposure to so many platforms that we have today, social media, 24-hour televised news. In the past month, I've really reduced the amount of time I spend watching the political commentary news shows, but even a half an hour unbiased network news is enough to leave me in disbelief at what's happening and what I'm hearing. I'm not sure it's generational or cultural, but I still steer clear of discussing my political or social views with those whose positions I don't know, or those I do know who have the opposite position from me. I don't want to insult or anger them or show disrespect. And I'm fortunate to have friends whose positions are opposite from me, and thankfully they feel the same way I do. This is what I think should be the norm. Might have been the norm in the past. Unfortunately, I also know people who are very vocal on their positions, which I don't share, and don't seem to care that I don't respond, I'm not answering back, I'm not arguing, but they keep relentlessly expounding their views. My mind is ready to explode, but I say nothing, and instead think horrible, judgmental thoughts about them, and I feel very guilty about it. Why do people feel this strongly to speak words or take actions that are ultimately so harmful? Why do I respond by feeling angry and judgmental towards these people? Am I a bad Buddhist for feeling this way? Should I speak up or be more of an activist? What's the Buddhist position on activism? Many think Buddhists are peaceful, even apolitical. Some might have questions on what Buddhist position or direction is on the topics that are polarizing our world today. Recently, the Nishi Hongguan Jihonzan issued a statement calling for the end of the war in Gaza, as it had done so in 2022 regarding the war in Ukraine. The statement doesn't reflect a political position, rather on Buddhist principles of compassion and a life without suffering for all. This is the battle between armed forces who uses unarmed civilians as their human shield and the world's leading powerful military who doesn't mind victimizing those people. Shinran, the founder of the Jodo Shinshu teaching, had also lived during a warring age in which many people suffered. Identifying himself as one of them, he described the most marginalized people as, "They are none other than we, who are like stones and tiles and pebbles. Shinran never wished for his own happiness only, and in reference to himself and others as we, represents his deep feeling of bond with all humanity tied together through the Nembutsu teaching. It is a matter, of course, that we would like to have his teaching as the basis of our lives, but it is also necessary for us to learn from his way of living. As Nembutsu followers who have encountered this Buddha's wish, we naturally come to aspire for a world in which everyone can live in peace and harmony. In accordance with the Buddha's vow, in consideration of those who have been suffering from battle, we call for immediate ceasefire and an end to war. 800 years ago, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism was established by Shinran Shonin during a tumultuous time in Japanese history when the imperial court was losing power to the warrior clan. There was despair across the population with natural disasters, disease. Even Japanese Buddhism had also become corrupt. Honen Shonin had initiated changes that revitalized the religion and provided new paths to enlightenment that opened up the teachings to all levels of society. Shinran became a disciple of Honen and formalized the religion. Shinran's changes to Japanese Buddhism was truly radical and was met with suspicion by the monastics, who saw him as a threat and was able to get the government to ban Honen and Shinran's practice and place him in exile for 5 years. The popularity of his teachings resonated with the population of common people, and can you hear me? Okay, there you go. And despite the hardship, the teachings and influence grew throughout Japan. All this to say that Shin Buddhism was founded in a climate of activism. Our founder was exiled for his practices and teachings, but he did not give up his belief that enlightenment was accessible to everyone through the simplicity of the primal vow. The teachings embraced all people from all levels of life, from the educated elite to the illiterate farmers. Priests married and taught and lived amongst the normal people, not in monasteries and only to the educated. He didn't just preach it, he lived it. What a rebel. I'm finishing up a 2-year Jodo Shinshu correspondence course administered through the Jodo Shinshu International Office, and this last quarter has focused on the history of Jodo Shinshu, which I found to be one of the most interesting because it exposes the challenges our religion has endured through its 800-year history, and the resilience it has shown to evolve and continue to spread beyond Japan in the 1800s to Hawaii, North America, and the world. The simplicity of Shinran's core teachings has never changed through so many years of migration and adapting to different cultures. His teachings on self-awareness, compassion, and gratitude are what I found to be helpful in understanding our behavior and reactions in the times we face now in the 21st century United States. So much suffering is based on misunderstandings, but not from what we see looking outwards, but what we're missing looking inward. When we really look inside ourselves with an open mind, we'll understand that we carry delusions and ego, our ignorance, our blind passions. In Gyome Kubose's The Center Within, he writes that we provide excuses for getting upset by blaming others or blaming conditions, always something else. We never look inside. If we did, we would be more humble, more kind when we recognize and see our own delusions and ignorance. We have the tendency to see only our own view and not to see or understand others. My family has always accused me of quickly blaming others or anything besides myself for something going wrong. I'm kind of a nitpicker and a problem solver, which I attribute to being an engineer. Something's not working, I need to analyze what's wrong, analyzing everything except myself. I use this as a reason or excuse for my behavior, and even that as a response with someone with an ego problem. It took me a while to realize this, and thankfully my family can be honest with me and kind of patient. Reverend Kubose states, "Thieves see only a world of crime and a selfish person only a world of greed. Too many of us see things through our own glasses, which are colored by our prejudices and preconceptions. How many tragedies occur because of wrong understanding?" This lack of self-understanding is so relevant in today's climate, We believe we're right and our opponents are wrong. We're good and they're evil. Much of what inspired me in my talk today is the result of reading the book Living Nembutsu, Applying Shinran's Radically Engaged Buddhism in Life and Society by Reverend Dr. Jeff Wilson, which was given to me by my Jodo Shinshu correspondence course and MA cohort, Ann Nakahira. It's an excellent book, and I encourage you to read it. And I hope you'll be inspired by it as much as I was. Published only last year, it is so well-timed and so relevant. Reverend Dr. Wilson has also given a talk on his book through the guest speaker series for our Everyday Buddhist website. So thank you for allowing me to plug both the book and Everyday Buddhist. This book really helped ground me in dealing with current events through the lens of a Shin Buddhist. Shinran wrote, "I know nothing at all of good or evil, but with a foolish being full of blind passions in this fleeting world, this burning house, all matters without exception are empty and false. The Nembutsu alone is true and real." Shinran understood that as a foolish being full of blind passions, he did not have the capacity to know good versus evil acts. He was no better than those who opposed him, and that only the Nembutsu is true and real. He taught that our ego, our self-centeredness, our attachments, our bombuness are the source of our suffering and the suffering we bring to others. Reverend Dr. Wilson writes that the differences we have with those whom we disagree are differences in circumstance. No matter how angry we feel towards our opponents, they are acting in ways that make sense in their own situation. And were we in those situations with the conditioning they've experienced, we might act similarly. He goes on to tell us that we remain foolish beings, just like our opponents, with limited wisdom to perceive our own motivation and feelings. Shinran's teachings tells us that the evil and foolish we consider opponents are not our enemies, they are us. Conflict with others is inevitable and is especially common when bringing about change in the world. When conflict occurs, we automatically take sides and assume we're right and the other side is wrong. Today's media rewards polarization and extremism, so the conflict is ramped up, causing people to see those they disagree with not only as wrong, but evil and dangerous. Does this sound familiar? Reverend Dr. Wilson also tells us that no matter how strongly we feel about our position, both sides of the conflict are bombus. He shared very wise insight from Dr. Taitetsu Uno, who said that when considering a conflict, the most important point to remember is that I am the source of the conflict. And the next important point is try to manifest the strength and wisdom provided by the Dharma to deal with my own subjective biases, thus becoming more open to other people's views, whether or not I agree with them. What a powerful Buddhist perspective. You can't have conflict without being part of it. Conflict always involves two people, at least two people. No matter how wrong I think someone is, there would be no conflict if my ego wasn't there asserting itself as right. This is not an easy practice to master, but we can try to follow Dr. Uno's guidance. Conflict is unavoidable, and we can still stand by our principles, but with compassion towards others and recognition that we are all bombus who are embraced by Amida Buddha. Isn't it nice to have practice a religion that doesn't tell you what to think, but just to think? Shinran said that even a good person attains birth in the Pure Land, so it goes without saying that an evil person will. This very important teaching recorded in the Tanisho reflects Shinran's emphasis on the compassion of Amida Buddha for all people, not just good people. We must understand and accept that we are all foolish beings and at times fall short, fail, or do bad things, no matter how good we think we are. As Reverend Dr. Wilson writes, this leads to a sense of our evilness. We discover on our Buddhist path that we may be evil, but we are embraced and affirmed just as we are by Amida Buddha. He also states that evil is not just a quality we define at a personal level, but can be society's term for unwanted or marginalized. These are the people who may be suffering the most and are in need of the most compassion. In Shin Buddhism, we must focus on we, not me. We cannot exist and thrive unless we allow everyone to exist and thrive. Ultimately, Buddhism is a religion of wisdom and compassion, which allows us to live a life of humility and gratitude. Gratitude as a central practice in Shin Buddhism allows people to appreciate life and become more open to kindness. Shinran teaches us that despite our ignorance and delusions, through reciting the Nembutsu, we can still appreciate the joy of life. We can appreciate all aspects of our lives, both good and bad. A Shin life of gratitude is to always remember that our present moment is a result of others, of our interdependencies. As we acknowledge all that we've received, our response is to want to serve others. We are grateful for the teachings in the life of Shinran. He was a visionary and established a teaching that would endure through centuries of hardships through history. We need these teachings now more than ever. We are grateful for the Issei pioneers who built our temples and established Shin Buddhism in a new country which wasn't always welcoming. They faced hardship, and despite sacrifices, discrimination, and even incarceration during World War II, they stoically are facing similar experiences even today. We are grateful for a new generation of Sangha members who offer a new vision while honoring the legacy of our pioneers. We are grateful for a changing face of our Sanghas with new members with different backgrounds, new perspectives, and contributions. Difficult times such as we are experiencing cycle through history as they always have and always will. I am optimistic that things will get better, but I will have to work very hard to practice the Shin Buddhist teachings of compassion and kindness through these trying times. The compassion of the Nembutsu transcends self-centeredness and our foolish selves. Both sides of conflict must embrace the teachings to ensure we can support a world free from suffering, a world that we want for our children and our grandchildren. In the words of poet Amanda Gorman, "For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." Please join me in Gassho, Shin Buddhist life principles. Entrusting in the vow of the Buddha, calling out the Buddha's name, I will pass through the journey of life with strength and joy. Revering the light of the Buddha, reflecting upon my imperfect self, I will strive to live a life of gratitude. Following the teachings of the Buddha, discerning the right path, I will share the true Dharma with all. Rejoicing in the compassion of the Buddha, respecting and aiding all sentient beings, I will work towards the welfare of society and the world. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.